Oh, do you have a Band-Aid? Because I scraped my knee when I fell for you. Get it? Because pickup lines. They're pretty annoying. Hiya folks, Fruit and Nagi here to complain about things that aggravate and annoy me. And going back to an earlier subject, or a similar earlier subject, something that does irk me quite a bit is TV stations and executives that either cancel a show far too early, ending a very promising show that has a lot of potential before it's really hit its peak, and then keeping around a show that has been going on and on, and people are really fed up with it. They're tired of the show. They just want to see it go away. And the first one that comes to mind when I say shows that people wish would go away would probably have to be The Simpsons. And actually, I'm really pretty impartial on that one because, as I've mentioned before, I've gone quite a long time without TV access. So there have been a large gap in years where I haven't been keeping up with The Simpsons. I haven't been watching the show at all. And so I haven't been seeing those sort of lackluster seasons coming out. I haven't seen the show hit real low points where it's pretty clear that they're losing steam and running out of fresh ideas. Not to mention all of the reruns over and over and over and over again. Being played on ad nauseum to the point you just don't ever want to watch an episode of The Simpsons because you've already seen it so many times. But I can understand that point of view pretty well, where it's like, hey, you know what, The Simpsons, it's had a good run, and maybe there's still some meat on the bone, maybe there's still a couple of new ideas or interesting angles they could try, but they would have to shake things up quite a bit. They would have to, for instance, those few times where they'll leap forward in the future and show all the Simpsons characters 20, 30, 40 years in the future. That might be an angle that they could explore, that they could do something with. But again, they would need to change something up. They would need to make some bold, drastic changes to give it any new life, to give the audience something to look forward to. And then from more of the kids' perspective, the shows that come to mind would be SpongeBob SquarePants, The Fairly Odd Parents, Teen Titans Go. They have, well, I wouldn't say this one quite so much with Teen Titans Go. It's not old enough. It hasn't been on the air that long. I just know it's a very unpopular show. But the first two, definitely, they've been on the air for many years. They started off when I was fairly young. That's pretty impressive to me that at this point that they're still on the air and they're still being made. Now, I would have to actually double check if that's 100% true for both shows, but last I ever knew, they were still going strong. Well, kind of whimpering quietly and refusing to die. A bit more grim, but probably more honest. And I will say, I think executives maybe come to the wrong conclusion when it comes to the TV shows, especially from the children's point of view. Kids don't have very many TV stations to choose from when they're looking for anything to watch. They basically have Nickelodeon, Disney, and Cartoon Network. And that's about it. Maybe a PBS, ABC Family, back when maybe it was a little bit more family friendly. I remember watching that a number of years ago and thinking that it wasn't the sort of family values I would have wanted for myself as a kid, or for my kids and other than an adult. But depending on the age of the kid and their interests, I could see a couple of other channels having some potential and ability to hold their attention. The Game Show Channel, TV Land, I watched that quite a bit as a kid. Animal Planet, a couple of channels of that nature. Though I could see some of those educational channels feeling a bit redundant after you already have gone to school. So I think what the executives kind of mix up is, well, kids are tuning in. That must mean they like the show and they want to keep watching it. But again, when you've got a very narrow and select amount of channels that you can really select from that are going to appeal to you at all or have any relevance, you're going to watch it even if you're going to pick kind of the least offensive, the least unsatisfactory amongst them. I remember doing that quite a bit when I was a kid. I might have seen the episode quite a few times, but it's like, well, I don't have anything else to do, and so I'd rather watch this rerun of this show, for instance, on Disney, maybe Darkwing Duck, DuckTales, as opposed to another station that has a that has an episode of something I just don't care for. I didn't really like Doug very much when I was a kid, for instance. Excuse me. And of course, I'm sure there's people out there that's like, hey, wait a second, Doug was never on the air at the same time as Disney's Darkwing Duck or DuckTales. And it's like, okay, I'll give you kudos for knowing that, but why did you know that? Just making conversation, and I could imagine people having that sort of exhaustive knowledge and memory. But anyways, you know, somebody tuning in or just having the TV on for background noise isn't the same thing as actually engaging with it. But, you know, for those folks on the other side, that doesn't really matter. Having the TV on and the channel on is the only thing that they are able to track. So it's pretty pointless either way. And looking on the exact opposite side, when they X out a show, when they cancel it for many fans way too early before it's maybe getting a little formulaic, but it's hardly tapped itself out. It's hardly maybe even scratched the surface, let alone hitting the bottom of the barrel and having to scrape for any ideas. And this one, of course, would be running the gamut as far as subjectivity goes, where diehard fans would always say, it's like, man, this show ended way too early. They should bring it back. They should revive it. And one show that comes to mind that came out a few years ago was a revision of Thundercats. I actually never saw the original series when it was airing, not even as a rerun. I just never saw it. But when I saw that new series came out, I watched a couple of episodes and I wasn't enthralled, but I thought it was a pretty interesting remake. I thought it had some real promise and it looked interesting. It held my attention, but I think it lasted at most 2 seasons and then they were already axing it. It was done. And I thought that was very disheartening to think that the show had barely started its quest. I was about to say Diego. It's like, I can't... Lion-O. I was trying to think of his name. You know, he had barely started trying to defeat Skeletor. I'm so bad with their names. I haven't seen the show for so long now. But, you know, he was just starting to go into the quest and... Nope, too bad. Sorry, fans. It's over. And that can just... It really sucks the wind out of your sails. It rains on your parade. And for me, it ruins the point of getting enthralled with the show, for getting excited, being invested, waiting with bated breath for the next week's episode, for the new season, because you just might not get it. And that does become a catch-22, because if you're cynical and you hang back on the sidelines and you don't invest, then you're not contributing to the viewer numbers. You're not helping the show stay popular, expressing to the network executives that, hey, I am interested, I am invested, keep it coming. But on the other hand, if you are faithful, if you take that plunge, that leap of faith, then you might be left hanging. You might get screwed over. And you just get left with nothing for all of that hope and aspirations. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm somewhat out of the game entirely because I don't have a TV, or I don't have TV service. So, on the one hand, I am sort of a non-player or a non-entity, but it still annoys me because I'll watch TV shows through non-classic TV services, and it's the same issue. And I don't know, because it seems like if shows aren't the cutting edge, the super popular, then executives just don't want to bother. They don't want to deal with a show that's doing all right, that's okay, that's holding a general audience, but isn't just a lightning rod of interest and dynamism. For instance, your Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, Survivors, those shows pull in tons of viewers, so they'll keep cranking those out, no problem. They'll keep up those series. American Idol, again, they keep that going on the air, but anything that's not that diva show, that's not, a crest mark of entertainment, there's just not a strong guarantee it'll keep going. So I don't know. And frankly, with how my rolls of the dice tend to be, I don't tend to catch on to those shows that are really popular. I just tend to be a little out of sync with the larger audience ship tends to like. Excuse me. So, again, that just kind of reinforces my not getting too involved. But, for those of you who are more actively involved, who do watch more often, what are your thoughts? Are there shows that's like, yes, please, put it out of its misery, let it die, give it a good send-off, give it a dignified end, so that it can end on a high note, maybe kind of pulling back upwards on what's been a downward spiral, or vice versa. It's like, what shows just went out of favor and disappeared way before you were satisfied? Some of the ones I mentioned, like Darkwing Duck and the original DuckTales before it got the reboot. Because as a kid growing up, many cartoons didn't get a closing. They didn't get a strong finish. They just stopped. They just terminated whenever they hit their end. And something I'm glad to see for younger kids and kids who are turning into cartoons nowadays is that many of the people who are working on these shows plan for that, who plan out possible endings and work that into the show, where it's got some forethought of how are we going to end this, how are we going to tie up the loose ends. And even for shows that I may not have watched or I might not like myself, I think that is nice to see. I think it really gives a good sense of closure. It's like, yes, it ended. It didn't just hit a brick wall and end abruptly. It had something to tie things together. But anyways, those are just my thoughts, my complaints, and sometimes the unfair nature of what's popular and what's arbitrarily unpopular, or the completely whimsical, nonsensical decisions of those who be and those who pull the strings. Sometimes you just can't figure out stupid. But anyways, folks, I hope this entertained you and maybe you didn't get too bittersweet and think forlornly about those shows that just weren't. But anyways, that's all for now. Talk to you later. Fruit and Doggy. They need to cancel this show, I'll tell you that much.